The strangest part wasn't that I took her wallet. It was that everything I thought I knew about my life started falling apart the moment I opened it. Rain hammered against the windshield of my black Escalade as Manhattan blurred into streaks of gold and gray beyond the glass. It was close to midnight, the kind of cold November night that made even the city seem tired. My driver moved through traffic with practiced precision while I sat in the back seat reviewing numbers on a tablet that should have held my attention. Instead, my eyes kept drifting toward the crowded sidewalk outside. People rushed through the storm with their collars raised and their heads down, each carrying their own problems home. Most of them would never know my name. That was how I preferred it. Power worked best when people only felt its shadow. My phone buzzed again. Another message, another request, another problem waiting for me to solve it. I ignored it. For 34 years, I had built my life around control. Control over business, control over risk, control over every detail. Yet that night, one small mistake would destroy the illusion completely. The traffic slowed near Lexington Avenue. Through the rain-speckled glass, I noticed a woman stepping out of a corner grocery store. She looked exhausted, blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail, thin gray coat that clearly wasn't warm enough for the weather. One hand held a paper grocery bag against her chest. The other reached for the small boy walking beside her. No, not a boy. A child's backpack decorated with cartoon rockets bounced against his shoulders, but the child himself was nowhere in sight. Strange. The woman looked around suddenly. Panic flashed across her face. She spun toward the street, scanning the crowd. Then she hurried away into the rain. A black leather wallet remained on the bench outside the store. Forgotten. Abandoned. My driver pulled forward before I could think twice. The wallet disappeared from view, yet something about the woman's expression lingered in my mind. The fear, the desperation. 5 minutes later, we stopped at a red light. I looked back through the rear window. The bench was still visible in the distance. The wallet remained there, soaked by rain. "Pull over," I said. My driver glanced into the mirror. "Sir, pull over." 2 minutes later, one of my security men returned carrying the wallet. "You want me to drop it with building security?" he asked. I took it from him. The leather was worn, cheap. The kind of wallet that had survived years of use because replacing it wasn't an option. "I'll handle it." He nodded and returned to the front seat. The city lights reflected off the wet leather as I turned it over in my hands. Normally, I would have instructed someone to locate the owner immediately. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. Maybe it was the look on her face. Maybe it was the loneliness waiting for me at home. Either way, I opened it. Inside were exactly $23 in cash, a grocery receipt, a library card, and a folded photograph tucked behind a transparent sleeve. The moment I saw that photograph, the air seemed to leave the vehicle. My heartbeat stopped. My fingers tightened around the edges, because staring back at me from that tiny picture was a face I recognized. A face that should have been impossible. A face I hadn't seen in 12 years. I stared at the photograph so long that the city disappeared around me. The rain, the traffic, the endless glow of Manhattan outside the window, all of it faded into nothing. There was only that face. Her smile was frozen in time, captured beneath a bright summer sky that looked as distant as another lifetime. My throat tightened. 12 years. 12 years since I had seen Olivia Romano. 12 years since I had stood beside a gravesite and convinced myself that the chapter was closed forever. Yet there she was, smiling from inside a stranger's wallet, as if the years had never happened. My security detail continued their quiet conversation in the front seats. unaware that my entire world had just tilted sideways. Slowly, I turned the photograph over. My pulse accelerated. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 4 words: "For my little sunshine." The handwriting was unmistakable. I knew every curve of every letter. Olivia used to leave notes everywhere, on refrigerator doors, inside books, tucked into birthday cards. She claimed life was too short not to leave reminders that people mattered. My hands began to tremble. Olivia had written those words. I would have recognized her handwriting anywhere. The realization hit me with enough force to steal my breath. This was not a copy downloaded from the internet. This was not a random coincidence. Someone connected to Olivia had carried this photograph for years. I looked deeper into the wallet. Behind the photograph sat a folded piece of paper worn thin from being opened countless times. I hesitated for a moment before carefully unfolding it. It was a child's drawing, crayons, stick figures, bright yellow sunshine in the corner. One figure was labeled Mom, another was labeled Noah. Across the bottom, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Best Mom Ever." I stared at the name. Noah, not Lily. Not a daughter? A son? 7 years old? Maybe younger when the drawing had been made. My mind raced through possibilities. None of them made sense. Olivia had never married. She had never had children. At least that was what everyone believed. Yet somehow her photograph had ended up inside the wallet of a struggling single mother carrying a child's drawing signed by a boy named Noah. The pieces refused to fit together. I reached for my phone. Within seconds, my head of security answered. "Sir, I need information." My voice sounded distant even to myself. "The woman whose wallet this is..." A pause. "Is there a problem?" "No. Just find her. Tonight, tonight." I ended the call before he could ask more questions. Then I looked through the wallet one final time. A library card, a grocery receipt, a few family photos, nothing unusual. Nothing that explained why Olivia's face had appeared in my life again after more than a decade. Yet as I studied the photographs, another detail caught my attention. In every picture, the boy smiled. Bright eyes, light brown hair, a familiar expression. Something about him stirred an uncomfortable feeling in my chest, a sense of recognition I could not explain. I leaned closer. Then my stomach dropped. Because for the first time, I noticed what the child was wearing around his neck. A small silver pendant shaped like a compass. The exact same pendant Olivia had worn every day of her life. I did not sleep that night. The compass pendant stayed on my mind long after I returned to my penthouse overlooking the East River. At 2 in the morning, the city lights still burned beneath my windows, but I barely noticed them. Instead, I stood alone in my study, staring at an old photograph resting on my desk. Olivia was 19 in that picture, smiling, wind pushing her blonde hair across her face. Around her neck hung the same silver compass pendant I had just seen in Noah's photograph. There had only ever been one pendant. I knew because I had given it to her myself. My fingers tightened around the edge of the frame. The memory returned with painful clarity. I was 22. Olivia was preparing to leave for a summer volunteer program in Colorado. She had been nervous about traveling alone. I had bought the compass from a small antique shop in Brooklyn and told her it would always help her find her way home. She laughed at me for being dramatic. Then she wore it every day for the next 3 years. The thought that someone else now possessed it made no sense, unless Olivia had given it away herself. My phone vibrated against the desk. A message from my head of security. Found her. I opened the file immediately. Sarah Mitchell, 30 years old, resident of Queens, single mother, works part-time at a neighborhood bookstore and weekends at a coffee shop. No criminal record, no outstanding debts. No unusual activity, just an ordinary woman raising a son on a modest income. There were several recent photographs attached. I studied each one carefully. Sarah looked exactly as I remembered from the sidewalk. Tired eyes, kind face, the quiet exhaustion of someone carrying more responsibility than anyone should carry alone. Then I reached the final image. Noah. My chest tightened again. 7 years old, bright smile, light brown hair, the same silver compass hanging from a thin chain around his neck. I enlarged the picture. My pulse quickened. There was no mistake. It was Olivia's pendant. I immediately called my security chief. He answered on the first ring. "Sir, I want everything. Everything. School records, medical records, family history. I want to know how that child got that pendant." Silence filled the line for a moment. Understood. I ended the call and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Rain still tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere out there, Sarah Mitchell was probably asleep, unaware that a stranger was unraveling the secrets of her life. Yet I could not shake the feeling that this was no coincidence. Olivia had been declared dead 12 years ago after a tragic accident. No body had ever been recovered. Authorities called it unfortunate, final, closed. But Olivia's disappearance had never felt final to me. Not completely. There had always been questions nobody could answer, small inconsistencies buried beneath official reports. At the time, grief had convinced me to stop looking. Now those old doubts returned with a vengeance. My phone buzzed again, less than an hour later. Another file had arrived. This time it contained Sarah's emergency contact information. I opened it casually, then froze. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. The emergency contact listed on every document was the same person. Not a husband, not a parent, not a sibling. The name read Emma Carter. Relationship aunt. I stared at the screen. Because Emma Carter was not a stranger. 12 years ago, Emma Carter had been Olivia Romano's best friend. By sunrise, I had made a decision that would have sounded irrational to anyone else. I was not going to confront Sarah Mitchell. Not yet. Questions were more valuable than answers when the truth was still hiding. The next morning, I sat in the back corner of a small bookstore in Queens pretending to read a novel I had not turned a page of in 20 minutes. The scent of coffee and old paper filled the air. Rain tapped softly against the front windows. It was the kind of quiet neighborhood place Olivia would have loved. That thought alone made my chest tighten. Then the bell above the entrance chimed. Sarah walked in carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffees balanced carefully in her hands. She looked even more exhausted in daylight. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. A loose strand of blonde hair escaped from beneath her knit cap. Yet despite the fatigue, she smiled at everyone she passed. The elderly customer near the magazines, the teenager studying at a corner table, the young mother struggling with a stroller. Small smiles, simple kindnesses, the kind that cost nothing but somehow changed a room. I watched as she stepped behind the register and greeted her coworker. Nothing about her seemed unusual. No hidden agenda, no secretive behavior, just a woman trying to make it through another day, which only deepened the mystery. At 11:15, the front door opened again. A boy rushed inside carrying a backpack nearly half his size. Noah. I recognized him immediately from the photographs. He ran straight toward Sarah. She laughed and knelt to hug him. The sound caught me off guard. Genuine happiness, warm and effortless. For a moment, I saw Olivia again. Not in Sarah's face, in the way she looked at the child. The same protective tenderness, the same unconditional love. Noah pulled a folded paper from his backpack and handed it to her proudly. Sarah studied it. then smiled wider than before. She kissed the top of his head and pinned the paper beside the register. After a few minutes, she returned to work while Noah settled at a nearby table with a stack of homework. I should have left then. Instead, I found myself staring at the drawing pinned to the wall. It showed a small house beneath a bright yellow sun. 3 stick figures stood in front of it. One was labeled Mom, one was labeled Noah, the third figure carried no name. My pulse quickened, because around the third figure's neck was a tiny silver compass. Noah had drawn it carefully, making it the most detailed object in the entire picture. I looked toward the boy. He was concentrating on a worksheet, completely unaware of my attention. Then something even stranger happened. An older woman entered the bookstore. Gray coat, dark sunglasses. Sarah's face brightened immediately. She stepped from behind the register and hugged her. Emma Carter. Even after 12 years, I recognized her. Older now, more tired, but unmistakably the same woman who had once spent every weekend with Olivia. The same woman who had disappeared from my life immediately after Olivia's accident. And as I watched Emma place a trembling hand on Noah's shoulder, one thought echoed through my mind. She knew the truth. She had known it all along. I returned to the bookstore 3 days in a row. Not because I lacked information. My team could uncover more details in an hour than most people learned in a lifetime. I returned because something about Noah refused to leave my mind. Every report I received only deepened the mystery. Sarah Mitchell had lived in Queens for nearly 8 years. Noah had been born in a small hospital upstate. No father was listed on the birth certificate. No marriage records. No public connection to Olivia Romano. On paper. Their lives should have had nothing to do with mine. Yet every instinct I possessed told me otherwise. On the 3rd afternoon, I sat near the children's section with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Noah occupied a small table nearby, building a model solar system from a school project kit. His tongue peeked out slightly whenever he concentrated. The detail made me smile despite myself. Across the room, Sarah helped a customer find a book while Emma organized inventory behind the counter. The scene looked ordinary, peaceful, the kind of life most people spent years trying to build. Then Noah's voice drifted across the room. My mom says people get lost when they forget who they are. I glanced up. An elderly customer had stopped to admire his project. That sounds very wise, the woman replied. Noah nodded seriously. My grandma used to say it too. The words hit me immediately. My grandmother had repeated that exact phrase throughout my childhood. It had become something of a family motto. I told myself it was a coincidence. Then Noah continued. Mom says Grandma Olivia used to tell her that all the time. My heart nearly stopped. Olivia? The elderly woman smiled politely, unaware of what she had just revealed. But I could not move, could not breathe. Sarah looked up from across the store. For a split second, panic flashed across her face. She hurried toward Noah and gently touched his shoulder. Sweetheart, remember what we talked about? Noah's expression fell. Sorry. Mom. Sarah forced a smile and guided him back toward his project. Yet I had already heard enough. Grandma Olivia. Not Aunt Olivia. Not family friend Olivia. Grandma Olivia. That single word shattered every explanation I had constructed. My phone vibrated. A new message from my security chief. We found something. I opened the attachment beneath the table. It was a scanned copy of an old storage unit rental agreement signed 12 years earlier. The renter's name made my pulse accelerate. Emma Carter. The unit had remained active until just 6 months ago. My eyes moved lower. Among the inventory records listed inside was a single item description: personal journals belonging to Olivia Romano. I stared at the screen in disbelief. 12 years. For 12 years, Emma had been protecting something connected to Olivia. Something important enough to hide. Something important enough to keep secret long after everyone else had accepted the official story. Then I looked back toward Emma. At that exact moment, she glanced in my direction. Her face lost all color. The box she was carrying slipped slightly in her hands. Recognition flooded her eyes. She knew exactly who I was, and judging by the fear on her face, she had hoped she would never see me again. Emma dropped her gaze almost immediately, but the damage had already been done. Recognition had flashed across her face like lightning across a dark sky. For 12 years, I had lived with unanswered questions. Now, for the first time, I was staring at someone who clearly carried the answers. I remained seated, forcing myself not to react. Across the room, Sarah continued helping customers, completely unaware of the silent storm unfolding between Emma and me. Noah focused on his school project, occasionally humming to himself as he adjusted tiny paper planets around a foam sun. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal. My phone remained in my hand beneath the table. Another message arrived from my security chief. We accessed the storage records. There are photographs, journals, personal documents. Everything belonged to Olivia. I closed my eyes briefly. If Emma had preserved Olivia's belongings for more than a decade, then she had never truly accepted the official story either. Nobody keeps journals for 12 years unless they believe those pages still matter. When I looked up again, Emma was walking toward me, slowly, carefully. Her expression remained controlled, but her hands trembled slightly as she carried a stack of books. She stopped beside my table without meeting my eyes. "Can I help you find anything?" she asked quietly. To anyone else, it sounded like a normal question. To me, it sounded like a warning. I looked directly at her. "I think you already know what I am looking for." Her fingers tightened around the books. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sounds of the bookstore continued around us. Pages turning, coffee machines hissing, customers chatting softly. Yet everything felt distant. Emma finally exhaled. "You should leave." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I spent 12 years leaving things alone." I kept my tone calm. "I am done doing that." Pain flickered across her face. Not fear, regret. Deep, exhausting regret. Some truths hurt people. Some lies hurt them longer. The words lingered between us. Emma glanced toward Sarah. The younger woman was laughing at something a customer had said. Then Emma looked toward Noah. Her expression softened immediately. I followed her gaze. The boy had finished his solar system and was proudly showing it to another child. "He is a good kid," I said. Emma closed her eyes briefly. "Yes. And Olivia's name means something to him." This time her reaction was impossible to hide. Her shoulders stiffened. Her breathing changed. The confirmation was all I needed. "Emma." Her name felt heavy after all these years. "Tell me the truth." She shook her head. "Not here." My pulse accelerated. "Not here. Not never. Not impossible. Not you are wrong. Not here." For the first time, someone had finally acknowledged there was a truth to tell. Emma reached into her pocket and slipped a small folded note onto the table beside my coffee cup. Her movement was so subtle nobody else noticed. Then she stepped back. "Leave now," she said quietly. "If Sarah sees us talking, she will ask questions." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. I waited several minutes before unfolding the note. Inside was an address written in careful handwriting. Beneath it were 6 words that changed everything. Bring Olivia's photograph with you. The address led me to a small house on the edge of Long Island, nearly 90 minutes from Manhattan. By the time I arrived, the sky had turned the color of steel and a cold wind rattled the bare branches surrounding the property. Nothing about the place stood out. No gates, no security, no signs that it contained answers capable of rewriting 12 years of my life. Yet my hands tightened around Olivia's photograph as I walked to the front door. Emma opened it before I could knock. She looked exhausted, as though she had not slept since our conversation at the bookstore. Without a word, she stepped aside and let me enter. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Family photographs lined the walls. Most were ordinary snapshots of birthdays, holidays, and school events. Then my eyes stopped on one frame. Olivia, older than the last time I had seen her. Not 19, not frozen in memory. Older, alive. My breath caught. The room spun. Emma noticed immediately. "Sit down," she said softly. I did not move. "Tell me that picture is fake." Tears filled her eyes. "I cannot do that." The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Emma reached into a drawer and removed a worn leather journal. I recognized it instantly. Olivia carried that journal everywhere during college. She placed it carefully on the table between us. "Read the first page." My fingers trembled as I opened the cover. The handwriting was unmistakable. Olivia's. Every letter, every curve, every familiar imperfection. The entry was dated 11 years ago. Not 12, 11. A full year after the accident that supposedly took her life. My knees nearly gave out. I lowered myself into a chair and kept reading. Page after page, entry after entry. Olivia describing a new town, a new identity, a life lived in secret. My vision blurred. None of it made sense. Finally, I looked up. "Why?" Emma wiped her eyes. "Because she believed disappearing was the only way to protect someone she loved." "Protect who?" Emma hesitated. Then she pointed toward another photograph sitting beside the fireplace. My gaze followed. The frame showed Olivia smiling while holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket. My heart stopped. The date beneath the picture read 7 years ago. 7 years. The same age as Noah. Suddenly, every scattered clue crashed together. The photograph in the wallet, the compass pendant, the stories, the connection, the impossible familiarity. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. "No." The word barely escaped my lips. Emma's voice broke. "I am sorry." I looked at her. "Tell me I am wrong." She shook her head slowly. "You are not wrong." My pulse thundered in my ears. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Emma reached across the table and placed a trembling hand over the journal. Olivia had a son. I could not speak, could not think, could barely breathe. Then Emma whispered the sentence that changed everything forever. "Noah is Olivia's child." The words echoed through my mind long after Emma stopped speaking. Noah is Olivia's child. 7 simple words. 7 words that shattered 12 years of certainty. I sat motionless, staring at the photograph beside the fireplace. Olivia looked happy. Not the forced smile people wear when they are trying to convince the world everything is fine. Truly happy. Her arms wrapped around a newborn child. Her eyes full of warmth, hope, peace. Emotions I had not seen in her during the difficult months before her disappearance. "Why did she never come home?" I finally asked. My voice sounded unfamiliar. Emma lowered herself into the chair across from me. Tears glistened in her eyes, because she believed home no longer existed. I shook my head. That does not make sense. It did to her. Emma reached for the journal and carefully opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. She turned it toward me. I immediately recognized Olivia's handwriting. The entry described her first months as a mother, the sleepless nights, the fear, the joy. Every line carried her voice so clearly that it felt like she was sitting beside me. Then my eyes reached a passage near the bottom. The date was 7 years ago. I read the words twice before I understood them. Sarah saved us. I looked up. Emma nodded slowly. Sarah and Olivia met shortly before Noah was born. How? Sarah was only 23. She worked at a community center outside Albany. Olivia volunteered there under a different name. I listened in silence. When Noah was born, Olivia had no family she trusted nearby, no support system. Sarah became her closest friend. Emma smiled sadly. Closer than sisters. I returned my attention to the journal. More entries followed: birthday celebrations, family picnics, Noah's first steps. Tiny moments that should have belonged to a normal life, a life Olivia had somehow built without me ever knowing. Then I reached the final pages. The handwriting became shakier, more fragile. My stomach tightened. Olivia wrote about being afraid, not for herself, for Noah. She worried about what would happen if she were no longer there to raise him. One passage had been underlined twice. If anything happens to me, Sarah will protect him. Sarah knows the truth. Sarah knows who he is. My chest felt hollow. I closed the journal carefully. What happened to Olivia? The room fell silent. Emma stared toward the window. Outside, the wind rattled the bare trees. She became ill 3 years ago. Her voice cracked. Very ill. I closed my eyes. Some part of me had already known. Emma continued quietly. She fought as long as she could. Sarah stayed beside her every day. I opened my eyes again. And Noah. A small smile appeared through her tears. Noah believes Sarah is his mother because that is what Olivia wanted. He was too young to understand. Sarah kept her promise. I looked down at the photograph one last time. Then a new realization settled over me. Sarah had not hidden the truth for herself. She had spent years protecting a child she did not have to raise, carrying a responsibility that belonged to someone else. And suddenly, for the first time, I understood why finding that wallet had changed everything. 3 days later, I stood outside the bookstore again with Sarah's wallet in my hand. The rain had finally stopped. Pale winter sunlight spilled across the sidewalk, turning puddles into mirrors of gold and silver. For the first time in years, I felt nervous. Not because of a business deal, not because of risk, because I was about to meet the people who had unknowingly changed my life. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped inside. Sarah looked up from the register. Recognition flashed across her face immediately. Then confusion followed. "My wallet," she whispered. I crossed the room and placed it gently on the counter. "I believe this belongs to you." Her eyes widened as she opened it. The relief on her face was immediate. Every dollar remained inside. Every photograph. Every memory. She pressed a hand against her chest. "You have no idea how much this means." I smiled faintly. "I think I do." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then a familiar voice interrupted. "Mr. Adrian." Noah looked up from a nearby table. His science project sat beside him. The silver compass pendant rested against his sweater. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Noah noticed. Cool and touchers, right? He asked proudly, holding it up. My grandma gave it to me. My throat tightened. It is very special. He nodded seriously. Mom says some things help people find their way home. Across the room, Sarah froze. Emma, who had been organizing books, lowered her head. They both knew exactly what those words meant now. I looked at Noah, really looked at him. Olivia's smile, Olivia's kindness, Olivia's hope, all somehow living on inside a 7-year-old boy building model planets and dreaming about the future. Do you like space? I asked. Noah's face lit up. For the next 10 minutes, he enthusiastically explained every detail of his solar system project. Mars, Saturn, black holes, future missions to the moon. I listened to every word. Not because I cared about astronomy, because I realized I never wanted to miss another moment. Eventually, Noah returned to his project. Sarah approached quietly. Her eyes were cautious but kind. Emma told me everything. I nodded. I know. Emotion filled her face. Olivia talked about you. The words hit harder than I expected. Did she? Sarah smiled softly. Every single year. I looked away for a moment, collecting myself. 12 years had stolen many things. Time, memories, chances that would never return. Yet somehow they had not taken everything. Olivia's love remained. Her son remained. The family I thought I had lost forever had survived in a form I never imagined. Noah suddenly looked up from across the room. Mom. Sarah turned. Yes, sweetheart. The boy pointed toward me. Is he family? Silence settled over the bookstore. Customers continued browsing. Coffee machines hummed. Outside, traffic rolled through the city. Yet everything seemed to pause. Sarah looked at me. Emma looked at me. And for the first time in 12 years, I knew exactly where I belonged. I smiled and walked toward Noah. Yes, I said quietly. I think I am. And somehow, after all those years, it finally felt like coming home.